Hey guys, it's Philipp with the Everyday Fighter podcast. Today I want to share with you something that it's an important part of the classes that I teach. And that is this idea or this notion in my head that with every class, I need to get them to a point where they are uncomfortable. Now, there are, of course, different levels of being uncomfortable, discomfort, right? Because it could be such if we're going through some new techniques, that's going to be uncomfortable anyway because, well, it's just new to them. So it's, they've got to go through those growing pains. But what I'm talking about here is getting them to a point where they start talking to themselves. And you may have been in those situations yourself in your own training where you're just exhausted, right? You're doing these things that you don't do on an everyday basis, right? Wind sprints, suicides, slamming balls down, or incessant punching and kicking, shoe shines, all that kind of stuff. And, you're not tested like that multiple times a day. Typically, most people, at least, the ones that are going to my class are not. So I think for me, that's something that's important to kind of get into them. It's like, hey, you're here anyway to learn things that are new to you, that you're not going to be practicing day in and day out or multiple times a day. So let this be one of those things as well, as, you getting to a point of just complete exhaustion, not only physically, but also getting to a point where it goes beyond physical. It starts getting that mental and emotional aspect in there as well. And that's really what I'm trying to get across to them. And you hear that term mental toughness a lot, and it's really a true thing, right? Just stress, fear, even if you're not doing anything physical at all, that takes its toll on you. That takes its toll, that pulls energy from you. So it'd be useful, I think, to have some practice in trying to manage that. Okay? So at least when things come up in kind of quote unquote real life, off the mat, outside of the ring, then you'll be better prepared to handle it. At least it won't be an unfamiliar sensation in your mind and body, right? So here's the thing that I enjoy doing. I don't know if my students enjoy it too much, but that's just part of the journey in any case. So what typically I'll get them into a position like, say, just an upright plank, right? So fully up, their arms are extended and they're just holding it, right? Or sometimes I'll do it where they're doing a horse dance, and it's kind of like a traditional martial arts move. But basically, if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like a squat, but your feet are further apart than your shoulder width. And you just kind of hold that position at the bottom of the squat. So you're really getting a burn in your quads and in your legs overall, and your back if you're not used to it. But I'll have them hold one of those positions, either the plank or the horse stance, for a while. And typically the intervals that we're building up to that point just to get them exhausted is around we'll do a Tabata sometimes, which is 20 seconds of 100% work, 10 seconds rest. So at the end, we'll get, they're kind of expecting, okay, it's going to be 20 seconds of this position. So I start counting down, typically from like 10, right? So I go 10, 9, 8, and they know this is going to be at the end of the workout already, right? It's really interesting to see the reactions from students that are unfamiliar with this process in my class. Maybe it's the first time they've attended my class. So, they're just waiting, right? Oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted. I cannot wait for this thing to be done. And then, they're just anticipating that moment when I say time and they're going up, they get up off the mat, right? But, I count down 8, 7, 6, 5. And then at this point, I start playing my games. I start putting them kind of through the ringer. So sometimes it'll be like I start slowing down my counting. 6, 5, 4. And then sometimes I'll just get to a point, I'll say like 5, and I just shut up. And just have uncomfortable silence because they're anticipating, even if I'm slowing down my counting, with those numbers going, and it just doesn't come. So now it just starts. If it wasn't before, playing with their head, then now things are starting to move around in their head. Thoughts are starting to go in there, and then sometimes I'll do this. I'll go 5, 4, and I'll pause, and I'll be like, you know what, I haven't had my second cup of coffee yet, so you know what, I messed up. Let me start over. So I go back again to 10, 9, and then sometimes I'll stop counting down. I'll count up, and then I'll put in random numbers, 44, 48, and then they just don't know what to think at that point. And sometimes I'll even throw in like letters of the alphabet in there, and it's just really interesting to hear the groans and like, oh my gosh, all in there. But that's the whole point of it, right? Because, whereas they weren't giving me that before, or they weren't, just expressing it that way. Now it's like, oh my gosh, because their expectation wasn't met, natural for thoughts and emotions just to start going. Now here's typically the way it works is I'll tell them, it's like, if it hasn't happened yet, this is usually the point where you start thinking things, You may be thinking, this is too tough. This is way too hard. You may be thinking things like the guy in the front of the room is just sadistic, and whether that there may be some truth of that or not, that's for other people to decide. But I tell them, it's like, these thoughts are coming. These thoughts, there's no avoiding them, but you control the thoughts. Now, here's the thing, though, is that you have to decide, and you have to notice, rather, what is that thought doing for me? How is it making me feel? What is the result of thinking this thought, right? Philip was a jerk. Okay, well, how does that make me feel? Maybe it may feel validated in a split second, but you still have to do the exercise, right? So I tell them, it's like, you got to notice whether that thought right now, and they're still in the plank position, or they're still in the horse stance position as I'm saying this, whether that is giving you strength or it's taking it away from you. And at that point, when you notice that, you have the choice. You have the choice of thinking a different thought. So you hear that term mental toughness a lot. Well, that's exactly what it is, right? It's you control the things that are going through your mind, or you can. I mean, there's a lot of times people are just on autopilot, right? They're in hypnosis land. And that's what a lot of people are in, particularly when I start counting down from 10. They're in a hypnosis of, okay, he's counting down at this cadence. He's counting down at this speed. I know what's coming next. 5, 4, 3, 2, and time, right? So that's kind of a hypnosis there. It's like, if you're driving on the highway or the freeway, right? Sometimes you get from your house to work or to the coffee shop or what have you, and you couldn't, if you looked back, you couldn't say, these are the things that I saw, on this particular day. It's just because it was just an automatic thing. You could put yourself on autopilot and you got to your destination and that was it. And that's the same type of thing here, where I'm trying to get people out of their hypnosis, right? Get it so that they're conscious about what is going on, but more specifically, conscious about what's going on in their mind. And once they're conscious about that, then that's when they can have the power to change. At the bare minimum, a lot of times this is all you've got, right? Is your thought, right? That's the place that you got to start. And once you realize that you've got that power to decide what the thought is going to be, and then have the power to notice how that makes you feel, whether it makes you stronger or weaker, that's when you can start really making changes, not only in the ring and on the mat, but elsewhere, right? Outside in your life. So then that's why I do that. That's why I stress it so much. That's why I think it's important to do that. And training is an opportune time for you to do that. I mean, test yourself. Right? I mean, you don't even have to have a kind of a jerk instructor like me to do this. I mean, you can be that jerk, or you can be that coach. You can be that empowering person for yourself. Right? You're hitting the bag. You're just completely exhausted, and you just tell yourself 5 more. You do the 5. You know what? Do 10 more. You know what? Do 20 more. And then you notice as you're telling yourself these things and as you're doing it, what's going on in your mind, how it's making you feel in your body, and you decide based on what your feedback is, how you're going to think, right? What's next for you? So that's it for today, folks. Hope that's helpful for you. I encourage you to do this when you are training. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you're doing. If you're striking, if you're grappling, if you're just doing drills, if you're jumping rope, doing road work, doesn't matter. Take that torch, run with it for yourself, and test yourself. Exercise that mental toughness. This is Philipp with the Everyday Fighter Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.